Read and Learn English is a place where you can enjoy simple, easy-to-understand English stories while improving your language skills. This book is written in clear English to help learners at all levels follow along easily. This is a story of adventure, courage, and dreams. It is about a young man who wanted to see the world, despite the warnings of his family. He was born into a good life, but his heart longed for the sea. He wanted adventure, new experiences, and freedom. But the sea is not always kind. It is powerful and dangerous. His journey was not easy. There were storms, fears, and difficult moments. Yet, there was also excitement, learning, and discovery. As you read this story, you will learn many useful English words and phrases. You will experience the emotions of the main character, understand his thoughts, and follow his journey step by step. Now, let's begin the adventure. Chapter 1: A Dream of the Sea. I was born in England in 1932. My father was a German businessman, and my mother was English. We were a good family. My father worked hard and made a lot of money. Because of this, we had a comfortable life. I had a good education, good clothes, and good food. Many people would say I was lucky, but inside me, I had a dream. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to go to sea. My father was a wise man, and he wanted the best for me. One day, when I was 18 years old, he called me to his room. I entered, and he looked at me seriously. "My son," he said, "I hear that you want to travel by sea." "But why? We have everything here. You can have a good life in England. The sea is dangerous. You will not be comfortable. You could even die." He looked at me with sad eyes. "My son, listen to me. You do not need to go to sea to have a good life. Stay here. Work with me. Be safe." His words made me think. He was right. The sea was dangerous. Life at home was easy and comfortable, but I could not stop thinking about my dream. Later, I spoke to my mother. I asked her to help me. "Please, speak to father. Maybe he will let me go." She looked at me kindly, but shook her head. "No, my son. Your father is right. The sea is not safe. Life in England is better for you." I was sad, but I did not forget my dream. 1 year later, I visited a town called Hull. It was September 1st, 1951. There, I met my friend. His father had a ship, and they traveled often. "We are going to London," my friend said. "Come with us." I was not ready. I had no plan, but this was my chance. If I wanted to know what life at sea was like, I had to go. I said yes. The ship left the port. At first, it was wonderful. The sea air was fresh, the sky was blue, and the wind was gentle. I felt free and excited. But after a few hours, the weather changed. The wind became stronger, the waves grew bigger, the ship moved up and down. My stomach felt strange. I was scared. Then a terrible storm came. The wind roared like a wild animal. The waves crashed over the ship. The ship went up high, then dropped down. I thought we would sink. I thought about home. I thought about my warm, comfortable bed. I wanted to be there. But by morning, the storm was over. The sea was calm. The sun shone in the sky. Everything was quiet. A man came to me and smiled. "That was nothing," he said. "Just a little wind." He laughed. I was surprised. To me, it was a terrible storm, but to the sailors, it was just normal. The man gave me a drink. I drank too much, and soon I was drunk. That night, I slept well. The next day, I forgot about my fear. I felt excited again. I wanted more adventure. For 3 days, the wind was weak. We moved very slowly. Then, suddenly, the wind became strong again. The ship moved faster. I felt alive. Then, Another storm came. This one was worse. The sailors were afraid. I was really scared. At that moment, I realized something. This was just the beginning of my journey. Chapter 2. Regret and Realization. The storm grew stronger. The wind howled, and the waves crashed against the ship. The ship went up and down, side to side. Water came onto the deck. The sailors shouted and worked hard to keep the ship steady. I was terrified. My body shook, and my hands were cold. I thought, this is the end. We are going to sink. I will die in the sea. I held on to the ship, praying for the storm to stop. My heart raced. I thought about my father's words. The sea is dangerous. You could die. He was right. I should have listened to him. I should have stayed home. If I survive this storm, I whispered, I will go home. I will never go to sea again. Hours passed. The storm finally started to calm. The wind became softer. The waves were still big, but they were not as dangerous as before. The sailors worked to fix the ship. They tied ropes, moved barrels, and checked for damage. I sat down, exhausted. My clothes were wet. My face was pale. I had never been so scared in my life. One sailor walked past me and laughed. Are you still alive, boy? I nodded weakly. You looked like a ghost, he said. That storm was bad, but we have seen worse. Welcome to the real life of a sailor. I did not answer. I still felt sick from the fear. Later that day, the captain called me. He was a strong man with a serious face. You are not a sailor, he said. You should go home. The sea is not for you. I looked at him and nodded. He was right. I wanted to go home. We arrived in London 2 days later. I could not believe I was alive. I stepped onto the land feeling weak but relieved. I promised myself, I will never go to sea again. But life had other plans for me. Chapter 3. The Call of the Sea. I spent a few days in London thinking about what happened. I wanted to return home to my family, but I felt embarrassed. I imagined my father's face when I told him I was wrong. He would say, I told you so. I walked around the city, trying to forget the sea. But everywhere I went, I heard sailors talking. I saw ships at the docks, ready to sail to new places. I heard stories of adventure, gold, and distant lands. A strange feeling started to grow inside me. The fear of the storm was still there, but something else was stronger, my dream. I met a man at an inn. He was an old sailor with a long beard and sharp eyes. He looked at me and said, You are young. You should travel. The world is big and there is much to see. I hesitated. I tried once, I said. I was in a storm. I was afraid. I thought I would die. The old man laughed. That was only your first storm. A true sailor faces many storms, but he also sees many wonders. If you want to live an ordinary life, go home. If you want adventure, go to sea again. His words stayed in my mind. That night, I could not sleep. I thought about my dream. I thought about the danger, but I also thought about the excitement. The next morning, I made my decision. I found a ship that was sailing to Africa. The captain needed more men. I walked up to him and said, I want to join your crew. He looked at me carefully. Have you sailed before? Yes, I said. I was in a storm. He laughed. Good. Then you are not new to fear. I signed my name and shook his hand. My heart beat fast. I knew I was making a big decision. I was choosing adventure. I was choosing the sea. The ship left London a few days later. The journey was long, but the weather was good. The sea was calm, and the sky was clear. I learned how to work on a ship. I helped with ropes, cleaned the deck, and listened to the sailors' stories. Then, one evening, the captain called us together. His face was serious. "We are near the coast of Africa," he said, "but we must be careful. There are pirates in these waters." Pirates. My heart pounded. The storm was bad, but pirates were worse. They attacked ships, stole goods, and sometimes took people as prisoners. I looked at the dark sea and wondered, did I make the right choice? The adventure was just beginning. Chapter 4. Captured by Pirates. The night was dark. The moon was small in the sky and the sea was quiet. The captain's words echoed in my mind. We must be careful. There are pirates in these waters. The sailors worked nervously. They checked the sails, looked out at the horizon, and spoke in whispers. I stood near the railing, staring at the water. Everything seemed calm, but I felt something was wrong. Then we saw it, a dark shape in the distance, a ship. At first, we hoped it was a merchant ship like ours, but as it came closer, we saw the truth. The ship was fast, and its sails were black. Pirates. The alarm rang. The sailors ran across the deck, grabbing weapons. The captain shouted orders. "Prepare to fight! They will try to board us!" My heart pounded. I had never fought before. I picked up a small knife, but my hands shook. The pirate ship moved closer and closer. Then, suddenly, boom! A cannon fired. Our ship shook as the cannonball hit the side. The pirates shouted and cheered. They fired again. Wood broke, and smoke filled the air. "Fight, men!" the captain shouted. The pirates threw ropes with hooks onto our ship and started climbing. The first pirate jumped onto the deck. He was big and strong, with a scar on his face. He swung his sword, and one of our sailors fell. More pirates came. The fight was wild. Swords clashed, men screamed, and blood stained the deck. I tried to fight, but I was not strong. A pirate grabbed me and pushed me to the ground. "Stay down, boy," he growled. I watched as our men fought bravely, but we were losing. The pirates were too many. Then the captain fell. A pirate with a red bandana held a sword to his throat. "Surrender or die!" he shouted. The fighting stopped. Our sailors dropped their weapons. We had lost. The pirates tied our hands and took control of the ship. I sat on the deck, breathing heavily. My dream of adventure had turned into a nightmare. The pirate captain, a tall man with a long black coat, looked at us. "Welcome to your new life," he said with a grin. "You belong to us now." We were prisoners. Chapter 5. A Slave in Africa. The pirates took us to the coast of North Africa. There they sold us as slaves. I could not believe it. One day, I was a sailor. The next day, I was standing in a market, waiting to be bought like an animal. A rich man with dark eyes and fine clothes looked at me. He spoke to the pirate captain, gave him some money, and took me away. I was now his slave. His name was Moha. He was a merchant, and he lived in a large house near the sea. His house had white walls and tall windows. It looked beautiful, but for me, it was a prison. My life as a slave was hard. Every morning I woke up early to clean the house, carry water, and serve my master. I worked under the hot sun with little food and water. I wanted to escape, but I did not know how. I was always watched. If I tried to run, they would catch me, and if they caught me, they would punish me. Days passed, then weeks, then months. One day, Moha took me onto his boat. He liked to fish, and he needed a servant to help him. He and I, along with a boy named Juri, sailed out onto the sea. I looked at the open water and felt something inside me, a spark of hope. This was my chance. For weeks, I waited for the right moment. I watched carefully. I learned how to sail the boat. I listened to Moha's orders. Then one day my chance came. Moha was not feeling well, so he did not come with us. Instead, he sent me, Juri, and 2 other servants to fish alone. We sailed out onto the sea, far from the shore. I looked at Juri. He was young, like me. I whispered, "Do you want to be free?" Juri's eyes widened. He nodded. The other 2 servants were not paying attention. This was it. I grabbed a wooden club and hit one of them on the head. He fell into the water. Juri took a knife and pointed it at the other servant. "Jump into the sea or I will kill you," he said. The man hesitated, then jumped. He swam back to shore. We were free. I took control of the boat, and Juri and I sailed away as fast as we could. The wind was strong and the sea was rough, but I did not care. I was free. We sailed for days, not knowing where we were going. We had little food and water, but we did not stop. We could not stop. If we went back, we would be slaves again. Then, one morning, we saw something on the horizon. A ship. A European ship. I waved my arms and shouted. The ship came closer. A man looked down at us. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am an Englishman," I said. "And I need help." The captain listened to my story. He looked at Juri and said, "You are both lucky to be alive." He offered to take us with him. I turned to Juri. "Do you want to come with me?" Juri thought for a moment, then nodded. We climbed onto the ship. I took one last look at the small boat that had saved us. My journey was not over. It was just beginning. Chapter 6. A New Life in Brazil. The European ship that rescued us was a Portuguese trading vessel. The captain was a kind man, and after hearing my story, he agreed to take me to Brazil. He also made an offer. He would buy Juri as a servant. I looked at Juri. He had helped me escape. I did not want to sell him like a slave, but Juri looked at me and said, "I will go with him. He is a good man." The captain promised to give Juri his freedom in a few years. With a heavy heart, I agreed. I had no money, and the captain gave me a fair price for Juri's service. The journey to Brazil took weeks. The ship was large and strong, and the sea was calm. It was different from my past journeys. I spent most of my time thinking about my future. When we arrived in Brazil, I stepped onto land with nothing but a little money and my freedom. The captain introduced me to some merchants. They helped me find work on a sugar plantation. Life in Brazil was different. The land was hot and green, filled with rivers and forests. I worked on a plantation, helping to grow sugarcane. The work was hard, but I was free. I started to save money. After some time, I had enough to buy a small piece of land. I began to grow my own crops. I learned about farming, and I made friends with other landowners. Some of them were rich and had slaves to work for them. One day, a merchant visited me. He told me about a business opportunity. "If you want to be rich," he said, "you must go to Africa and bring back slaves for the plantations." I did not like the idea of slavery. But in Brazil, it was common. Many landowners became rich by trading slaves. The idea of adventure returned to my mind. If I went to Africa, I could make money. I could grow my farm. I thought about it for days. Then, I made my decision. I would go to Africa. I found a ship with other merchants. We planned the journey together. I felt excited. This time, I was not a prisoner. I was in control of my own destiny. As we prepared for the journey, I did not know that my greatest adventure was about to begin. Chapter 7. The Shipwreck. We left Brazil on a warm morning. The sea was calm, and the wind was strong. Our ship was small but well built, and we had a good crew. The journey started well. We sailed for weeks, heading towards the coast of Africa. I felt confident. I was not the same scared boy from my first voyage. I had learned how to survive at sea. Then, one night, everything changed. Dark clouds filled the sky. The wind became wild. The waves rose high, crashing against the ship. A storm was coming. The captain shouted orders. "Tie down the sails! Secure the cargo!" The rain started to fall, heavy and cold. The ship rocked violently. I grabbed onto a rope, trying to keep my balance. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by a loud boom of thunder. The sea roared like an angry beast. Water came onto the deck. "Keep the ship steady!" the captain yelled. But the storm was too strong. A giant wave hit us. The ship tilted to one side. Barrels and wooden crates slid across the deck. "Help!" someone shouted. I turned and saw a sailor fall into the sea. The dark water swallowed him instantly. My heart pounded in fear. The ship was breaking apart. The mast cracked and fell. Another wave crashed over us. "Abandon ship!" the captain screamed. I ran to find a lifeboat. The ship was sinking fast. I jumped into the water, gasping for breath. The sea pulled me under, and I fought to stay afloat. For what felt like hours, I struggled in the water. The storm finally began to calm. When the sun rose, I saw land in the distance. With my last strength, I swam towards it. The waves pushed me onto the shore, and I collapsed onto the sand, exhausted. I was alive, but I was alone. As I lay there, breathing heavily, I looked around. The island was covered in trees and hills. There were no houses, no people, no ships. I was completely alone. This was not the adventure I had planned. This was survival. Chapter 8. Alone on the island. When I woke up, the sun was high in the sky. My clothes were wet, my body was sore, and my head ached. I sat up slowly and looked around. The island was silent, except for the sound of waves crashing on the shore and birds singing in the trees. I was alone. I stood up and walked along the beach. The ship was gone. Broken pieces of wood floated in the water. I searched for other survivors, but I saw no one. I was the only one who had reached the shore. Fear filled my heart. What would I do? How would I survive? I took a deep breath and told myself to stay calm. I had to think. The first thing I needed was shelter. The sun was hot, and the night could be cold. I walked inland, looking for a safe place to stay. The island was covered with trees and hills. I found a small cave near the edge of a forest. It was dry and hidden. Then, I needed food and water. I walked back to the shore, hoping to find something useful. Among the broken pieces of the ship, I saw a wooden box. I pulled it out of the water and opened it. Inside, I found some biscuits, dried meat, and a small bottle of fresh water. It was not much, but it was enough for now. I also found a knife, a rope, and a few tools. These things could help me survive. As the sun began to set, I returned to my cave. I ate a little food, drank some water, and tried to rest, but I could not sleep. My mind was full of questions. Was anyone looking for me? Would I ever leave this island? The next morning, I made a plan. I had to find more food and water. I explored the island. I found a small stream with fresh water. I also found fruit trees. The fruit was sweet and juicy. I realized that I could survive here. Days passed, then weeks. I built a small hut near my cave. I made a fire using dry wood and stones. I learned how to catch fish with a spear. But even with food, water, and shelter, I felt lonely. I missed talking to people. I missed my old life. I often stood on the beach looking at the horizon. I hoped to see a ship, but no ship came. I was trapped, and I did not know if I would ever escape. Chapter 9. A New Life on the Island. At first, every day felt the same. I woke up, found food, collected water, and repaired my shelter. But as time passed, I learned how to live on the island. I made a better home by building a fence around my hut. This protected me from wild animals. I also planted some seeds from the fruit I had eaten. After a few months, small plants began to grow. I found goats in the hills. At first, they ran away when they saw me, but I built traps and caught a few. I kept them inside my fence and fed them. After a while, they became tame. Now, I had milk. I also discovered a cave deeper in the forest. Inside, I found a cool, dry place to store food. This became my new storage area. I marked the days on a piece of wood. I counted the months. I had been on the island for over a year. One day, I saw something that changed everything. I was walking along the beach when I saw footprints in the sand. I froze. The footprints were not mine. Someone else had been here. My heart raced. Who was it? Were they friendly, or were they dangerous? I followed the footprints, but they disappeared into the trees. I did not see anyone, but I knew the truth now. I was not alone. That night, I did not sleep. I stayed inside my hut, holding my knife, listening for sounds in the dark. The next day, I found something else, a pile of bones and ashes. Someone had made a fire and cooked meat here. Then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Human bones. Whoever had been here was not just a visitor. They were cannibals. I felt sick. My island was no longer safe. I ran back to my hut. I had to prepare. If they came back, I needed to defend myself. I sharpened my weapons. I strengthened my fence. I planned places to hide. For months, I lived in fear. I watched the beach every day, waiting to see if the cannibals would return. And one day, they did. From a hill, I saw them arrive in canoes. They pulled prisoners onto the beach. I watched in horror as they prepared to kill them. I had a choice. I could hide, or I could try to save the prisoners. I gripped my gun. I would not let this happen. It was time to fight. Chapter 10. The Rescue. I took a deep breath, my hand shaking as I gripped my gun. I had never fought anyone before, but I knew I could not stay hidden forever. If these cannibals continued their terrible rituals, my life would always be in danger. I counted the men on the beach. There were about 20 of them. But I also saw their prisoners. One man was tied up, struggling to free himself. I had to help him. I waited for the right moment. As the cannibals prepared their fire, I aimed my gun and fired. The loud explosion echoed across the beach. One man fell to the ground. The others jumped back in shock. I fired again, hitting another one. The rest of them panicked. Some ran toward their canoes, others looked around, searching for the attacker. Then I ran down to the beach, waving my arms. I wanted to scare them away. The sight of me, a strange white man with a gun, made them scream in fear. They grabbed their weapons, but I fired another shot into the air. That was enough. Most of them ran to their boats and paddled away. But one man stayed behind. He had a knife and ran toward me. Before he could reach me, the prisoner on the ground broke free, picked up a wooden club and struck the cannibal from behind. The man fell, and the prisoner turned to look at me. He was young, strong, and had a look of deep gratitude in his eyes. He pointed to himself and said something in his language. I did not understand, but I knew he was thanking me. I smiled and said, "You are safe now." From that moment, we became friends. I gave him the name Friday because I saved him on a Friday. Friday was intelligent and eager to learn. Over time, I taught him English, and he taught me about his people and the lands beyond the island. He told me the cannibals sometimes took prisoners to other islands. With his help, I felt safer. I was no longer alone. Together, we built a better home, but I still dreamed of leaving the island. And one day, that dream came true. 2 years passed. My life on the island had changed completely. With Friday's help, I learned new skills, grew better crops, and even built a stronger boat. But in my heart, I still longed to return to civilization. Then, one morning, something incredible happened. We saw a ship on the horizon. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but as it came closer, I realized it was real. But something was wrong. The ship's crew seemed to be fighting among themselves. Through my telescope, I saw a group of men with weapons. It was a mutiny. The ship's real captain and his loyal men had been taken prisoner. I had an idea. If I helped the captain regain control, maybe he would take me home. Friday and I hid near the beach and waited. When some of the mutineers came ashore, we attacked them by surprise. With my gun and Friday's speed, we captured them quickly. Then, I sent a message to the captain on the ship, letting him know that help had arrived. With his remaining men, we fought back against the mutineers and took control of the ship. The captain was grateful. "Sir," I said, "if you take me back to England, I will forever be in your debt." The captain smiled. "You have saved my life. I will take you home." I turned to Friday. "Will you come with me?" He nodded. "Wherever you go, I go." After 28 years on the island, I finally left. As the ship sailed away, I looked at the island one last time. It had been my prison, my home, and my greatest teacher. I was not the same man who had arrived here all those years ago. I had survived, and now I was going home. Thank you for reading this incredible story. If you enjoyed this journey, imagine how many more exciting stories you can read and learn from. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Read and Learn English, where I share more simple and fun English stories to help you improve your reading and speaking skills. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing stories. See you in the next adventure.